Hey guys, thanks for tuning in again. Today, Chief Vernon Ward is going to be talking about special operations during the Gulf War. Really cool to talk to him about this. He is going to go into things like scud hunts, personnel recovery, search and rescue, and much more. Hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. So we talked, if you wouldn't mind just doing a short recap. I know we talked on this once and then we backtracked a little bit. Just a short recap of how you got your job as a liaison with the Air Force, and then I'll let Rob take over for getting into Desert Shield and Desert Storm, if that's all right with you, Rob.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's fine. I basically sent to what then was 23rd Air Force, because they didn't have the SOG, but that was the Air Force Special Operations here at Hurlburt. And when I got here just in time to be involved with Desert Shield and Desert Storm as the LNO, and basically my job was to go with the first element anywhere that they were alerted for, to help them plan for what types of assets were going to be needed to support the ground element, the special forces guys who were coming in. So I wound up being deployed about 300 something days a year, every year, because AFSOC is a very busy place, and they're supporting worldwide operations. So anywhere we had special forces, then that meant I was on the road. Sometimes we went in specifically to do things for them, like Somalia, to do the ground control for the gunships. Sometimes I went in to help facilitate the train ups for SF teams who were going to be functioning, like doing personnel recovery or other missions that they were being supported by the AFSOC for. And as it turned out, what was going to be a 3-year assignment turned into 8 years, because every time the CGs at USOC and AFSOC changed, they would determine that I was going to stay at Hurlburt. Part of that also was because I developed a program called HAVACE that got SOCON to fund, where we did lots and lots of live fire. They basically got 2 solid weeks of every night they were doing live fire forced entry, live fire personnel recovery, live fire hot exfiltration, live fire IADs with air support. So that program was extremely popular, and it ran basically 50 weeks a year.
And is that when you say live fire, you mean not just personal weapons, but airborne weapons as well?
Oh, I mean, at the time, the miniguns on the MH-53s, which were the primary infill-exfil platforms, gunships firing at the same time, sometimes some fixed wing interspersed into that. So basically, when that team came here, they got to do fire support planning that was real, and everything was live fire. Their live fire immediate action drills were all going on while they had a 53 flying, put minigun fire, helping to support them breaking contact. That was like 50 to 75 meters over in front of them, and the gunship engaging targets further out, and that team controlling all of that. And for a lot of them, that was their first real experience to have that type of support, and they were able to do things that they couldn't do at home station.
That's a really big jump on from Vietnam. If you think of 1-0 school and all of that. You never really had any connection to air support during any of the training in country.
Yeah, all the TacAir training I got was OJT.
Yeah.
But I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to work the gunship, nearly all the gunships from the C-47, the Spooky, and I worked Puff, Spooky, and some of the first Spectres during the time I was on the ground.
Wow. So when you go, we fast forward into deploying for Desert Shield and Storm, and you're there as liaison. So what were the team's missions? And how how many guys and what were their jobs that you would be then helping with the air support for?
Well, initially the GCI sites that had to be taken out to start the air war, those missions were initially assigned to 2A teams, and we convinced them that probably was not the best way to do it, because we could use the Apaches to actually take them out. And the problem was the Apaches didn't have the FLIR, the forward-looking radar, and so 53s literally led the Apaches up a wadi below ground and kicked out bundles of chem lights, and they elevated up and took out the GCI sites. But other teams were assigned everything from scud hunts to route reconnaissance. There were basically some of the same types of missions that some of the teams had been assigned in SOG. It's just there was no desert there to conceal them. So consequently, every time a team went in, they had rehearsed over and over and over with the air crews that were putting them in. Some of the air crews actually would stay with the teams, and they would rehearse to the point to where they didn't even need a written execution checklist. They had it down. But some of the teams had to actually carry in their own hide site material. And rucksacks were extremely heavy going in, not just with water, but with material for them to actually dig into a sand area and construct a hide site to where they wouldn't be detected. And the teams, once third group got there, the first of the third got there, their teams were also assigned additional recon missions, just like several of the fifth group teams were. So a lot of that had to do with facilitating the air support for those teams that were going in and going out. There were numerous intelligence failures. We put a team in well before the air war ever started, or the ground war started, on a scud hunt, and the area that we had put them into turned out to be a lava bed. They couldn't even chip their way into it, so they had to be extracted the next morning during daylight, which was again an intelligence failure because we had requested the subterranean surveys, and even though they were in existence, the agency that had them didn't want to give them up.
Right. Okay. So, you've got a whole bunch of teams going in, and what are you're back at the FOB, I guess. And what's your job there? Are you monitoring all the teams on the net, and then
I'm trying to monitor the teams on the ground and make sure that we have as quick a response as we can to anything that goes down. it turned out not to be that big a problem because the crews that put them in were pretty much hanging around there also. The several teams did get compromised and were successfully extracted, one of which was they had broken into 3 elements, and we didn't pull the last element out for like 36 hours, and we pulled them out of their tertiary exfil point. So all the planning that went into it worked. We actually did not lose any team members that were across. Not a single team that was crossed on an RT had a casualty.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, considering we had our famous SAS compromised team, and having to E&E across the desert at the same, that was all happening at the same time, right?
Yeah, it was, but they were in a slightly different part of the country. Obviously, they were further west than most of the areas we were focused on. We had, like I said, we had a couple of teams compromised that I think I don't know how many books, but lots and lots of publicity after that about it. But then we also had teams that went in and literally linked up with the Allied forces as the Allied forces passed over them. So they were on the ground the whole time and have successfully completed their mission.
Fantastic. And can you tell us about the mission to interdict the fiber optic cable system?
Apparently the French had built the fiber optic system for the Iraqis and able to get some intel on where it was, and that mission was kind of a thrown together thing where there was a British 47 took an element in. There were several U.S. involved with that, and it was like 20 miles west of Baghdad. They went in and they literally landed the helicopter, dug the fiber optics cable up, set the charges, and then detonated it as they flew away.
And what was
the one thing? Go ahead.
What was the cable for?
The fiber optics cable basically was his connectivity with all of his GCI and radar, NIR radar.
Wow. Yeah, that's a high value
just
target.
Another example of what our concept of the British military, and they just have the audacity to do things sometimes that U.S. commanders would never attempt, even back then, because of their risk assessments. Whereas it seems that, like, for example, the SAS, they just do it. There's not really a question about risk, because they just accept the fact that a combat is risky, and they are much more prone to act rather than react. And that's one thing we've always loved about working with Brits.
I think they have a very small chain of command to deal with the SAS.
Yeah, but you also have a command structure that supports action and not a lot of negative reaction.
And so, thinking about from the intelligence side of things, what were some of the challenges you had on this deployment with regards to intelligence?
Well, there would be agencies. Obviously, you have alphabet agencies throughout the intelligence community, and anything that they have in the way of information is power. So knowledge is power. So they're reluctant sometimes to give up any of their power by sharing intelligence. They also think that they're better suited sometimes to determine what you actually need as an operator than the operators are. We've actually had them come back and ask us, why do you need to know whether the door opens inside or out? And we're like, because we have to go through the door. And they go, oh, well, we didn't think you needed to know whether or not it had deadbolts, whether or not it what type of door it was, the construction. They're not they're intelligence people. They're not operators. And the fact that at that point, so many of those alphabet agencies were in existence, that, for example, when we put the team in on the lava bed on a scud hunt, we had no idea that there was a lava bed there, but they did. And in the after actions afterward, they said, well, we didn't think that was important. Well, that's not the intelligence community's job to decide what we think is important. And that was one of the big after action bullets after Desert Storm, was that once again, just like a lot of times in Vietnam, there were intelligence failures that were not necessary, and it all had to do with maintaining my realm. And our recommendation then was that we have the ability at operator level. We should have the ability to just type in a subject, and everything that everybody in the entire intel world has on that subject should come up right there. We don't care the source. We don't care, about what got the intel. We only want the intel. And I think even today that still remains a problem because of the power structures and the egos involved.
Yeah, I've read recently the book about the jawbreaker teams in Afghanistan, where you've got agency guys and fifth group guys working together in parallel, and they seem to complement each other really well on that operation, where the agency had a lot of money, and the fifth group guys had pocket change, but the fifth group guys were going forward, and the agency guys were kind of handling all the intel stuff behind them and intercepts and all that kind of stuff. And they just seemed to work really well. And in 4 weeks, they nailed, they had Kabul, and they pushed bin Laden right back to the border. So that's a really good example of where you've got agency and SF working together and achieving rapid goals.
Yeah. In classic UW, SF would actually have their own intel nets. And even though they did have rudimentary intel nets all the time in every conflict and in every deployment, they don't get to develop them like they really should. And it's critical that we get the intel from other sources, and we get the aid, like you said, from the agency. I mean, there's one ultimate goal, and that's to win.
Yeah. So, no, good thoughts. And can you tell us about the mission at the Kuwaiti airstrip?
We were going into the airstrip. The Marines were apparently trying to secure one side of the airstrip. We tried to get in initially. even prior to the tank battle they got involved in, but we couldn't get through the oil well fires because the smoke was so thick that we went to zero visibility. So we backed out. Actually, they put the entire armada on the ground, and then decided to go around and go out to sea and come in from the water side. And once we hit the airfield, the terminal had not been secured yet, had not been cleared. And one of NCOs that I'd had previously actually on a team with me, and I basically cleared the lower level of the Kuwait International Airport. That's where the sand table that had the defense of Kuwait City laid out on it. We found that. We found numerous documents, maps, plans that neither one of us could read enough Arabic to really decipher. So the intel folks had a heyday with the stuff we found there. One of the things we did find was a still warm, half-eaten meal, but basically it was cleared. It was cleared with pistols and pen lights.
Was there any actual resistance there when you went in?
There was still the Iraqis were trying to get out. That was the beginning of the highway of death, and there were still several small firefights going on. The perimeter and further out. Obviously, a lot of the fifth group guys had already gotten to the city itself, and they had a few skirmishes with the Iraqis that got left behind, but there was no major fight going on after that. Nearly everything that went on after that was the highway of death. And that was just basically a massacre.
Yeah.
It was impressive to see, but it was a turkey shoot.
Oh yeah, they were hightailing it out of there. So at the time, Chief, you talked a little bit about the MH-53. What other aircraft were you working with at the time, and like what units were you working with in the Air Force and in the Army, if you were?
With the Air Force, well, with the Army, any of the USOC elements, and we also had SEALs. We had SEALs. Yeah, the other thing that was kind of memorable about the Kuwait incursion was obviously the American, British, and the French embassies were a political thing that they had all three agreed to reoccupy simultaneously. So the Brits came in, and I'm assuming they had one of the SAS elements with them. I don't really know because we were busy back with third group at the time getting theirs set up, and the French had an element. We all simultaneously departed Kuwait International, and all simultaneously reoccupied our own embassies. And the embassy, the U.S. embassy, was I don't know. We had to fast rope guys into it because of some other things that had gone on prior to that. But we were hovering in a 53 fast roping as they started to fast rope in, and we were over the pool at the embassy. And I'm looking out of the aircraft, and I see a beach umbrella go shooting across the surface of the pool, and all of a sudden it inflated and came straight up through the rotors. And I'm sitting there thinking this would be a hell of a way to die when I got killed by a bomb, a beach umbrella munition. And that just so happened the squadron commander was standing right there with me watching this happen, the 53 squadron commander, and he just shook his head, and on his headset he told the crew, he said, "That's it, let's get out of here." So we left.
So you didn't fast rope?
Oh, I didn't go into I was never intending to go into the embassy, but that was a third group operation. They had been assigned that even when they first got into country.
Got it. So the guy still went down. You just stayed with the aircraft.
Oh, the guys all went in.
Yeah.
And
a beach umbrella munition. I gotta remember that one. That's great. So at this time, was it the 20th SOS still operating the 53s at that time?
yes.
So
Yes.
okay, that's cool.
Yeah, Colonel Comer was the squadron commander, the one I was just talking about. Later, General Comer. There were we had the 53s there. We had the 160th. We had 3rd Battalion and 160th there with us. We had elements of the 8th SOS, which was the H model gunship, and the 919th SOS, which were the A model gunship, the reservists.
AC-130s?
AC-130s. We had the 8th, the combat talons and the refuelers and everything for the aircraft, for the choppers. It was a different place. We had Colonel Johnson, Jesse Johnson. He's well known throughout the SOF community or the SF community, and through the CAG guys, but he was the SOC commander. And the fact that he was only an 06 is one of the things that in the after action led to them making all the SOCs a flag billet, because whenever Colonel Johnson would go as a major command commander to the staff meetings in Riyadh with General Schwarzkopf, he obviously was the only non-flag officer in the room. And he had his own choice words about. He had his own choice words afterwards when we would have conversation about those staff meetings. So Schwarzkopf really was never an SF fan until Desert Storm, and after Desert Storm, he said, I never realized how much you guys could do. So
that's cool. That's cool. You won him over. That's awesome. Wasn't that the same with Abrams in Vietnam? Well, I don't know if he was won over, but wasn't he not so fond of?
Oh, he again goes back to that thing I was talking about earlier. During the time I was an infantry officer, a special forces qualified infantry officer, the regular army hated us.
Yeah.
They hated anything that had to do, quote, special. And special forces was the kiss of death for a conventional officer.
That's wild how that's the case. I mean, I don't know if it's still looked at that way today or not, but I know it's its own kind of thing. We always really looked up to all the SF guys that we met. I mean, there's never a
that from like the mid-90s on, that was a change in the outlook. But prior to that, it's still, SF was kind of the bastard stepchildren of the military.
Yeah.
So
Got it.
We talked all the stories about, remember when I stole this and I stole that and I stole this in Vietnam. That was
Yeah.
true because we weren't on any established supply lines. I mean, the conventional forces had their own established supply lines. We didn't, especially in MACV. We could get any kind of exotic thing we wanted. If we sent it up the line and said, we want, this kind of a weapon, but just to get a Jeep, just to get a Lister bag, there was no way for us to go through a supply chain, and do that. That's why we became so adept at larceny and trading. There's no telling how much stuff we actually were able to get just because we knew how to get whiskey and they didn't have whiskey. And so they would let us drive off literally with a 5-ton and help us load it up with stuff.
Midnight requisition.
I've heard it said it's almost part of the culture because you want your guys to be able to thrive in any environment. So if they're learning to, like you say, barter and haggle, and quite often they'll be, deployed with units from all other nations of the world as well. So it's sort of a situation where you've got the culture where you just kind of fit in and find a way to do things, and it's almost like that's like a positive spin on the fact they don't have a supply.
Yep, it's kind of like the kind of guys we wind up that gravitate to special forces or guys who make it happen. Some guys wish it would happen, some guys watch it happen, and some guys make it happen. And our guys are the guys that make it happen. And as long as we have those kind of guys, then my old thing that I used to tell all of them are there are two types of people in the Army. They're careerists and they're professionals. Now, if you're worried about your career, don't come where we are.
Can I ask a question around the air support here? Was there conflict or tension with more conventional units over access to the assets that you were controlling?
When are we talking about?
Oh, in Desert Storm.
Not really. We had several things that were identified, and even today, every time we have a new UW university or whatever pop up, some of the major things are covered in that. But for example, every day they would have a thing called the spins, which are special instructions that are published in an air tasking order. Okay, and that air tasking order lists every flight that is scheduled for that 24-hour period. But the spins change daily. The spins contain the radio frequencies that are to be used for AWACS, ABCCC, for the tanker support, for whatever. And I'm sitting in that in a meeting, and I said, we cannot do that. And they're looking at me like, I have horns or something. I said, we can't do that. And they said, why can't you do that? I said, because we have no way to guarantee that we have comms with a team once they're on the ground in a hide site. There's no guarantee that we can send them every day an updated frequency for them to use. I said, we're going to have a dedicated frequency just for SOG for the entire time that this war is going on. They said, well, what happens if it's compromised? I said, if I'm on the ground, I don't care if it's compromised. I just have to be able to talk to somebody. I said, so what if it's compromised? I said, if it's compromised and I'm talking on it because I'm compromised. So they already know where the hell I am. Now I need to be able to tell you to come get me or to bring me support. And so that was one of the issues we had. Another issue we had is every time we go across the black line, we stop squawking. And we almost had 253s on one of the early infills get shot down because the ABCCC had already diverted aircraft to take out the helicopters. So they figured the helicopters actually recognized that they were U.S. helicopters and didn't engage them. And so we had to go through a big nut roll, and we can't be in the ATO because we can't have them publishing, the fact that we're putting teams in here or we're putting teams in there. And we can't be squawking because obviously they can hear the squawk too.
Mm-hmm.
So that was another issue that had to be corrected afterwards. There were just a number of administrative things that prior to that, you never had to have the conventional Army and SF so embedded together. It was a learning experience for a lot of them.
Chief,
But it was things like that continued to make the make Desert Shield, Desert Storm an interesting thing.
sounds kind of like a headache. And you guys were used to operating with compromised comms from, I mean, at least having been in SOG in Vietnam, you knew what it was like to operate in that condition. You're not worried about these guys can hear what I'm saying. I just need that air support and I need extraction.
And if I'm up talking like that in the clear and I'm not using CAC codes or anything like that, they already know exactly where I am.
Right.
So, I mean, let's be realistic about this.
Right.
They already know where I am and they know who I am and they know what I'm doing. So I need somebody to come help me now.
Got it. So when did you start doing your AC-130 support? Did you start, or I know you probably worked with them, but when did you actually start directing AC-130 support? Didn't you do that eventually?
Actually, I did that in MACV.
You did that in SOG, but didn't you eventually do that primarily as your job?
Oh no, not primarily. It was just one of the
things you did.
Of the, we whenever we were not deployed or I was not deployed out of Hurlburt, every night we were working the ranges live fire. So we worked the gunships just about nightly.
Got it. So you were tight knit.
We were able to identify things like at the time the laser target designator for the Army was this big cumbersome thing that whenever you had an LTD mission, it was a royal pain in the ass, and it actually was a crapshoot because if in fact the ingress corridor was not firmly established, if he threw that thing up in the basket, he'd throw an LGB up in the basket, the aircraft would, and if it happened to be off a 45-degree cone, that LGB might come actually to the LTD, to the laser target designator, instead of the refracted laser energy off the target. So you had coordination issues that had to always be in place, and it was just a royal pain. Plus, the gunship wasn't real fond of it because a lot of times it would white out some of their sensors. And so we did a little research and we found a thing called an LPL-30. And the LPL-30 was a laser point light. And it was 4 inches long, 2 inches wide, 1 inch thick, would fit in your shirt pocket, worked off AA batteries, and had a range of 3,000 meters. we could take that laser point light and sparkle a target for the gunships or for anybody on nods. We could sparkle a target and designate with that LPL and not have to worry about the laser target designators. Plus, we had all of the TMAGs, the original beacons that we were using in Vietnam for gunships. We had all of the TMAGs that were left in the inventory. And we also had PPN 19s, which was another terminal guidance beacon. So basically, we had all of the equipment that existed to do terminal guidance for not only the gunship, but also to do it for fixed wing also.
And with those things, that LPL 30, that can't put an LGB in on, with guidance, can it?
No, because
Yeah.
the LGB has to have a certain amount of refracted laser energy.
Okay.
Okay. And if it doesn't have that, then it starts searching for the greater source, which is sometimes if they're off out of that cone that I was talking about, he has to ingress to loft that LGB. If they're outside that cone, there's a chance that it becomes the laser target designator, and the bomb will come to you.
Did you ever have aircraft with laser designators that could put, that could sparkle a target and then have another aircraft hit it with a LGB?
I'm aware of that happening, but I never used them.
Okay. So you guys are primarily just working with that visible. Was it visible or IR that it would do?
Oh no, it was IR.
It was IR. So it's not. Yeah. So you're not giving away your position at all with this thing. It's only over IR, and they can see it through their. Is it just through their nods they can see it, or can they see it through FLIR too?
They can see it through their sensors.
Yeah.
You got the sensors on the aircraft that can pick that up.
Got it. So
that is exactly what we were using to sparkle targets in Mogadishu with.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. What kind of missions would the AC-130 be on? You talked about scud hunts. I know in Mogadishu they gave you guys a bunch of different targets throughout the city, but during Desert Storm, what's your ideal mission for them?
Well, that really and truly was a very limited theater for the AC to work in because of the air defense system they were having to go against.
Oh yeah.
If you remember, we lost an AC-130 over Kafchi, and the reason for it was basically they stayed over target too long, and the first AC-130 that worked choppy that night took out a bunch of their vehicles that were in that element, the Iraqi element that came across. They took out a bunch of those vehicles. That was primarily their mission would have been to react to some type of contact, where the threat was not significant enough for them to have to worry. But the one that went down stayed too long because it stayed until it started to get light.
Is there always a team on the ground, or do these things go out and is it like going out on the Ho Chi Minh Trail and just knocking out trucks and stuff?
A lot of times, the whole thing that got them into Vietnam was, in fact, to take out the trucks and stuff on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And when they weren't supporting us, that's what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
They were coming out of Thailand, and they were hitting trucks on the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
Were the tasking similar during Desert Storm when they were available?
Nah, they were tasked against specific target areas, and there was, even though they flew every night, a lot of that was actually as camp defense. Had the Iraqis decided to come across anywhere, then you would have had gunships for air support over any of the bases that were along
Gotcha.
the border.
Gotcha. Understood.
Now, the Talons did get employed on the other side a couple of times because they dropped some Blue 82s. We've dropped Blue 82s during Desert Storm.
That's a
What kind of-
Matter of fact,
15-pound
one of the
bomb.
British units that was up on the border before everything started was several miles away from them when they dropped the first one. And the famous transmission is they came up and they said the bloody Americans have just nuked them. They were close enough they thought it was a nuke.
Yeah, that's a pretty big ordinance to use against the target. Man. If you enjoy our videos, please like and subscribe to stay up to date with our upcoming releases. Additionally, if you love SOG Prairie Fire, consider supporting us on Patreon to help us continue releasing top quality content through our new mod, SOG Nickel Steel. Links in the comments.